I thought today, Jason, we could talk about Claude Design, which is, I want to say a new product, but it's kind of a new way to use Claude. And the way to get to it is claude.ai/design. And I'll show you the product in a minute here. But before we do, I just want to talk a little bit about maybe a preamble to introduce what it is. So it's not really a product, but if you've used Claude artifacts before, just in claude.ai or Claude Cowork or what have you, if you're just creating those little interactive HTML elements, this is like that portion of the workflow, but maybe under a different tab or a different area of Claude to use. And though it's called Claude Design, I would say it's probably more of a like a way to spitball design ideas, if that makes sense, or ways to come up with visual languages or a brand identity that you can then try in other areas. Now, I spent a lot of credits actually creating about 8 or 9 designs. And I'm mentioning this preamble because I don't think I onboarded properly. So I didn't come up with that design system first. Instead, I hopped right in and created the designs. So you may notice some similarity across the designs, unfortunately. Easy things like the toolbar might always be on the left or things like that. But what I want to show, and maybe a little bit further into the presentation, is that you can actually like create slides and things like that once you've created that design system. And I'll talk about how I got there, because it took me a while to find a design that actually worked. And in fact, I was cheating a little bit by importing somebody else's. So I used a little bit of Charm Bracelets design, and where it didn't exist, I think Claude kind of painted in the corners. So let's get started. So the first thing is, this was announced on April 17th. I think that was a Thursday or Friday. I somehow missed that, but I found it on the weekend. I figured it was one of these weekend announcements again. But if we look at what they're saying it does, so it lets you collaborate with Claude to create polished visual work like designs, prototypes, slides, one-pagers, and more. So like a way to create visual elements. And there's a YouTube video that goes through some pretty cool stuff. It's a lot of things in here, but what I want to touch on are these points here, just to be clear. So the first one is prototype. So you're not making a full app. And I want to say this because I'm going to talk about Lovable and Bolt as points of comparison further on. But this is more like maybe a Figma or Illustrator, or maybe like a Canva. In fact, it does feel very similar to Canva for me. Although in Canva, you then go in and print and do things with your design. This is sort of that first step to decide if you've got like a brand that works. The next is product wireframes and mockup. So I used to use a tool for this called Pencil that I think is open source, but you could basically just, it's kind of like a napkin drawing tool. So imagine that you're just spitballing some designs and you want to see many of them together so you can compare and contrast, which is cool. And that brings us to the next one. So it's design exploration. So when you say, hey, I want like a dark version and a light version, the question might be, well, do you need a retro version, an accessible version? And the question is, can you create all of these at the same time and kind of look at them? The next is pitch decks and presentations. Full disclosure, I was not looking at this for pitch decks and prezos. I did make one just on a sample app or what have you. The next is marketing collateral. And I really do think that this tool is quite good at making those like marketing landing pages. And maybe I disagree with this last one. I apologize, but I really don't think it's the best at frontier design. But it could be that I'm using the tool wrong. And I think in the preamble prior to this call, we were talking about that. It feels like a lot of these tools are coming out, and people are assuming that there's a way to use them, like the way that they used tools in the past. And it might just be that this is a different tool, and you need to use it differently. And they kind of get into that in this next little bit, which is honestly like the end of the page. There's not a lot on here. So it says your brand built in. And this is a key point that I missed, and I'm so sorry, because it's going to influence the rest of this demo, but I'll talk about it as we go through. So during onboarding, Claude Code will let you build a design system that you can then use to create other designs from. I did not do this. In fact, some of this includes uploading a font. So be prepared to have like opinions about fonts and fonts weights, as well as like how your design is laid out. Should everything be on the right or the left, centered, what have you? All of these things are important because they're going to come into play once you start making actual designs in there. So mea culpa, I did make a mistake. That was mine, but I'll talk about where that was. And then the next is import from anywhere. It is certainly text heavy, but you can also import documents into the file to make it better. I will say it had a pretty hard time with animated GIFs. So if you've got something that's got motion and you're trying to show how the motion works, that may not work as well as an import. It will, if prompted, look at all of the frames in the GIF, and you can get around it that way. But it's probably best off splitting those out beforehand so you can try it. Okay, last one here is that fine-grained controls, and this is true once you've got the design system. I will say if you do not have the design system, you're going to run out of credits so quickly. I'm on the max plan, but the usage for this is actually separate to it. I ran through a week's worth of credits in, I want to say half an hour, like really quickly. And I was multitasking. I was trying to do many designs at once, but I will say that after that, it goes into usage-based cost, and the costs were pretty high. Like I ran through $50 very quickly. I had to turn on like enhanced usage in order to just get these demos running, for example. So it is one pretty expensive, has a different quota, will chew through credits pretty quickly, and will then go into extra cost if you're not careful. So if you're just trying to spitball a design with artifacts, I feel like Claude Cowork or Claude, the desktop app, may be better suited for that. But let's get into what I actually designed. Sorry, I'm saying I here, but like what Claude helped me design. Now I think I said 8. Oh, sorry. There's a design language, and then I think there's actually a slide in here as well. Okay, so the first one is please go through the learn about Claude design tutorial. I had not. It's a much better idea. The next in here is under prototypes. When it says design system here, if it's none or if it's the default, it will look like Claude. Neither here nor there, but it's sorry, not like Claude. It will look like an Anthropic design. Neither here nor there. It's just that everyone knows that sort of cream or beige background that have you. The other is slide deck, which we'll get to the other at the end. And then there's from template. And then finally, there's just this other, which is like open-ended if you're trying to do something. Now, again, I went through designs. I didn't do any examples. And then I made one design system here. And I called it Palm after Pom Pom. I'm really bad at naming things. Sorry. So some of these names of designs are not great. But we'll go through what I was looking at. So the big thing for me was to figure out if I could design something that looked like, let's see if we can make this a little bit better. My apologies. If I could design something that looked like it did not come from Anthropic was kind of the goal. Now, Jason, you don't need to give me your opinion on this design, but I will give you mine. I feel like this is pretty crowded, but what I did really like about this tool is in here under tweaks, which is on the top, you can go in and say like, hey, I want a dark theme, light theme. Again, this is high contrast. Maybe it's good for like a McDonald's ordering system or something like that, but like generally not, and I'm not going to say not great design, but like not the design that I was looking for. This is certainly serviceable, but it's not the same. The other is in here, a lot of times you'll have options for here for like compact, normal, comfy. It's set to normal right now. So things are closer together, but in a big UI like this, like a 10-foot UI, maybe comfy is a little bit better. So a little bit more spacing. And it's kind of fun to go through here. Now, I had told it a requirement was I should be able to use a Japanese layout keyboard in order to use it. So it gave me some options in here. And I'll talk about how that works as you go along, because as you're prompting, there's a new interface that will give you little bubbles that you can click on to sort of guide the interface. Those are very key. And there's an other for most of those. It's very important to go through that and like give it the actual design that you need. Anyway, I'll make this pretty quick here. So there's a Copilot fab here, just saying like, hey, can we throw some Gen AI in it? And is it, healthy, which is what it looks like now, or degrade it? And I'll click on that just to show you. So all it does is just show what this option up here is. Now, I'm just going to hide this really quickly. There are still some leftover Claude things in here, and I want to point that out because if you can see, I went through a lot of tokens just to get here. And what I realized after the fact was a lot of what I was doing was actually just fighting with Claude to not make its own UI because I hadn't made a design system. So again, before you start, make sure you create a design system or import one because you're just going to waste tokens trying to get to somewhere else. Anyway, so the prompt for this is kind of hidden in the background, but it's like teenage engineering. They make some, you may have heard like little audio instruments, some looping playbacks, that kind of stuff. But I figured it's kind of like brawn design or newer. I should also say like I love design, so I used to read communication arts and print magazine and things like that. So design is my passion, but also I could be the guy reaching for Comic Sans. So just because I like it doesn't necessarily mean that I have good taste, which I think this UI sort of shows off. All right, let's look at another one here, and we're going to quickly go through just overviews of what these are and how they're different. Again, so this is just a different UI here, but you can see I was trying to make it look different. The other is that for this one, I started with wireframes, and then I went to design, so I just want to quickly go through the wireframes. Now, for these, it kind of feels like, if I zoom out, it feels more like a Figma. So there's many different designs in here that I can go through. So they're like the settings pages, the alerts pages, deploy rollout. This is just me coming up with like a fictitious like Pi management system. So for each of these, you can go in and look at it. And I will say, like this little bit here where it says like live grid and stuff like that, like these little notes are pretty interesting. But I feel like what people really want to use is these comments up here. So just creating comments as you go along to sort of annotate the tool, because that's where I think Figma really shines, is having that collaborative aspect. So I can make a design decision and then invite you, Jason, to come in and give me comments on it, what have you. And that to me feels like a real workable system. Whereas just having artifacts is one thing, but I'd have to email them to you and then you'd email back, and those changes get pretty big. Sorry, those changes can give you pretty big overhead. All right. And then again, going back into the orchestrator, you can see how this looks completely different than the dark mode Claude UI or what have you. So I had to prompt quite a bit to get here, but it's not like it's hard. The other thing is that it will often, we'll remove the tweaks here, try to give you cream in some of these areas where you don't have anything defined yet. So it's important to push back against the cream once it comes in, but obviously having that design system first will help. All right, and the next one here is I just want to talk about different ways that you can design. So in this case, excuse me, I'm designing for a phone interface. And what you can do is actually have things that are designed for multiple different platforms. So you could have like a mobile app, a phone view, a desktop view, and have it spit out all three at once, and then make changes to all three at the same time, which is actually pretty powerful, as opposed to creating different apps and then having to go through later and fix it up. Again, this is just like a quick calendar app that doesn't really show a calendar was the idea. What would it's kind of like the question would be like, do I need a jacket before I check the weather before I leave the house? And the question is, when I wake up in the morning, what do I need to know? None of these are new ground. These are kind of like old app ideas, but I figured I'd go through some of the common ones. So calendaring, forms, chat apps, these are kind of common things. And all right, this is one of the bigger ones, and I think this is probably the biggest success. So for this one, I gave it a like an IRC app prompt. And I gave some of these prompts to a few different apps. And all I want to say is that like this right out of the gate, I thought looked pretty good. You can see that cream in the background, but there's no more burnt sienna buttons or anything like that. So no more orange buttons. And we're getting into a little bit of the Tech Pro purple on this one, the Tech Pro purple gradient. And I can zoom in a little bit more here. My apologies, but you can see what's going on. So it looks Datadog-esque. Sorry to put too fine a point on it, or maybe like Slack and Datadog kind of together, but it has that feel to it. But it doesn't look too Claude-y or Claude-like or Anthropic-like. So what I did was I took this and decided to create the design language out of this one, which was a little bit more difficult than you expect. So I used it to give me the instructions, which is basically download all the files and then upload them into a new one, no problem. So when we go into these files here, you can definitely grab the HTML and you can absolutely give it the components. These don't really help too much. Most of what you need is under this components folder here. Now, the problem is that these are going to be zip files. So you download them as a zip. And then when you go to create the design language, you have to upload each one independently. But once you do, you can then create a design system. So in this case, what I did was, you can see it wasn't open. Extra usage there. It doesn't actually show the files. That's too bad. But I did actually drop all the files in here and then go through it and then told it to create a design system, which it did. I will zoom in a little bit. My apologies. And we can see the design system here. It's already approved, so we should be good to go. And then we created this design language. Now, the design language itself, again, you can see that there's cream in here. It definitely crept in a little bit, but it's a good start to I would say like kickstart someone like me who likes design but doesn't necessarily know what brand guidelines look like or has not created brand guidelines before. Like I might not know which fonts belong to which. I might not understand like the whole language of the system. So in this case, exciting and colorful was kind of one of the parts of the prompt, but like what that actually means, I'm not sure. Like it may not end up looking like this. This sort of looks like Easter to me. Like it feels like Easter bunny kind of design. There's a lot of like pastel purples and stuff like that. But using this, you can then start, imagine I did this first. You can then start creating your apps from there. Oh, my apologies. This is a different one, but we'll go into this last one here. Okay. So using that design language, I was then able to create some slides. Now, we don't need to, I invented this app, so we don't need to look at these slides too much. But what I'm going to do, let's just tilt full screen so you can look at this. So this is a slide designer. There are There are some problems with this, but in general, I think it looks pretty good. I think the only thing that I might say is bad is like this little sparkle should probably not be on like the cheek area. But like, if that's the only problem with this whole page, I think it's pretty good. Again, remember this is fictional. I'm not starting a startup or anything like this. I just prompted it to give me a chat app. I won't go through the whole deck, but if we just browse through, we can see that it definitely adheres to that design language that we had. I wouldn't say that this is a good slide deck, but I would say it's an acceptable slide deck. If someone brought me this deck or presented this in front of me, I wouldn't say there's too much wrong with it. It's pretty text heavy as opposed to image heavy, but it certainly does follow the brand guidelines, which is nice. In fact, it introduced some things that I didn't necessarily call out, such as radial gradients, I think is what these are, where they look like a starburst kind of, which are nice. They actually add a little bit to it. The other thing is that it was able to, because I was using an app that was already there, create screenshots and sort of explain the app for me. Anyway, I thought this was kind of a nice little loop where I could create a design and then present the design all within the same app, following the same design brand pattern that I wanted. Okay, so we're almost done here. Basically, it just goes through the rest. I don't think any of these felt out of place when I looked through it. Like, none of them really looked bad. Like they didn't feel like they were off of the design, basically. And that's a big win for me because I don't think that's the case for other iterations of artifacts that I've seen before. Now, I'm talking a mile a minute. I apologize. We'll take a big pause here, big breath. After all this, the question in my mind was, could I use this daily, or could this replace a subscription that I've already got? Because I feel like that's where Anthropic is now, is they're looking at other products. Maybe it's Lovable, maybe it's Bolt, which are the two that I immediately thought of. And like, what would those look like? So I mean, given that fleet control panel prompt, the exact same prompt for all three, I gave it the same one that I grabbed from Codex. I'll go full screen here just so you can see it. But I feel like out of the gate, without creating the design pattern, this works really well on its own, and it doesn't have that Claude feel. In fact, in a similar vein, if we go to something Bolt created, it has a similar feel as well, but somehow still does not look like it was a Claude design. It has yet a different feel to it. And again, it may not be the best design, but if the goal is to create different designs, I think it does a good job. This isn't to say that Claude Design is bad or it can't be used to create designs for you. I think it's early days for one, but I do feel like there's a spot for it that might exist maybe before a Canva or maybe even after, between, but like working with it. I'll say in my past, I have been the house of no before, and I feel like a lot of these tools are attacking that audience. So if you're thinking about your normal day-to-day operations within a software company, or maybe a bricks and clicks company, you think about the departments that you would go to and ask questions, they'd be like, no, like absolutely not. We're too busy. It's got to be next quarter. It feels like a lot of these tools are taking up that banner and trying to help you out with that toil. So in this case, it feels like death by infinite cuts when you're dealing with designers. I used to be that person. As somebody who helped found a company, I was the sole person on the team who could do any design stuff. And the conversations were so frustrating. Like maybe Jason, you would say, hey, like, the red on the button's nice, but could we make it brighter or something like that? And then you go back and forth. It could be days, weeks, hopefully not months or years, but you just trying to figure out what that one right shade of red is. I do feel like doing that with a Gen AI agent may be better suited. The other is being able to quickly spin off like different prototypes as like a product manager is a really good skill, because then you can show those wireframes to a designer and get started more quickly. So I think that's kind of where this tool really shines. I wouldn't say it's the best at creating slide decks, but if you created a design in here, I think it's really good at creating a deck that will describe the design. So I think in terms of presenting a brand, it's actually pretty well suited for that. Maybe not the decks that you and I create now, but maybe next week we'll get to a point where it's that. So all this to say, so Claude Design has launched. I think people are looking at it as a competitor to maybe Canva and Figma. I guess on my end, I was thinking more about the rapid application development spot. Like where would this exist in my workflow if I was using like a dark software factory or trying to create many apps that were under one brand? How would this fit in that mold? And I think it does a pretty good job of fitting within the Claude ecosystem. In some cases, maybe not better than artifacts, but also very similar. But I will say, in terms of creating that brand document, which you can already do in Claude, it's much better suited in here because you can see what will bear fruit from that design. You'll be able to see that design language immediately, whereas in Claude, it could take a long time to actually create a sample app and get through it. Anyway, all this being said, I think it's a really good tool. It's still early days. It's only 4 days old. The guidelines on it would be absolutely follow the onboarding. Do create that brand design if you've got a brand. If not, come up with one. It's going to be well worth your time because you get way better designs out of it in the end. All right, so it's a little bit longer than I expected, but so there's a lot to go over. Hopefully, something in there is useful for you, but I think it is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah, no, this is great. I've been definitely curious about it ever since they made the announcement the other day. I've seen some videos and whatnot. It seems like it's adding guardrails. You mentioned, you were holding it wrong. You were doing it wrong or using it wrong by not going through that sort of wizard onboarding thing to get your brand doc and all that set up. I think I'm totally making assumptions here, but I feel like the reason why we even have this, or Anthropic has put this out, is because people have been holding their other products wrong. And like, I can tell you, we often are creating content where we want to make sure that we're, using the right color schemes, the right color palette and things like that. And like, this is just putting guardrails in place to empower others so that you don't have to be that bottleneck and that person who says no. It's like, because the truth is, I want you to create stuff. I want you to communicate out. But we, as a team, whatever brand, whatever your company is, we've got a brand voice, and we've got a color palette, and we've got logos that, you have to use and can't use in certain situations. And as long as everybody follows the guidelines, which are now basically baked into your conversation and your tool, then what's left to like worry about? Honestly, it just gets down to the content, the message of the content, or the content of the message.
Exactly, just down to messaging. Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of people would tell you that that's where the value actually is. It's less so the debating about the button color or what have you, but more how can we quickly get the content to the people who need to actually get it.
Yeah, and the other thing too, you made me think about too. Just one more quick comment is that. You had mentioned that it's not the design you were looking for, when you first saw like the output, the artifact. I think, maybe it's a good thing for us to not just assume that the artifact is going to be right or correct or perfect or whatever it is in our mind that we've made, that's what our expectations are. I think there's times where we expect to get what we thought, we were going to get. But also, I think we're very much thinking through like, what do we want to hang on to in terms of what element of this is still good and interesting to us, and being creative and helping, kind of set yourself apart from those tech bro designs and stuff, which, looking at the background of our videos, we might have to do something.
The purple to pink gradients. Yeah. I think it's across the industry for sure.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's just, point is, I think it's going to make us, or at least it's making me feel like I need to be more creative in the places where I can be creative, and let it handle the stuff where, it's not going to be creative. And that's kind of what we're angling for here. So, all right, Ryan, well, I appreciate all that and look forward to talking to you again.
Awesome. That was fun, Jason.
All right. See you.